Good morning. My name is Paula Dukehart. I'm a school sister of Notre Dame, and I'm very happy to share with you the story of how I have experienced God's call in my life. When I think back, it all began when I was still quite young. I think I was probably in elementary school, where I had been given a good foundation in the faith through my parents at home, and then that was built upon through the Sisters of Mercy who taught us in elementary school. By about the 7th or 8th grade, I know I began to really feel a sense of God tugging at me, calling me, luring me in a way. At least as I look back on it today, I would use those words. I didn't know what this could mean, but I was very much attracted to know God more and to find ways to give myself in that relationship with God. I kept praying and seeking to have a sense of what would God possibly want, and proceeded on to high school, still listening, still having all the activities that would be part of normal growing up years, and having that little voice, that nudging, that calling that would not give up. That was part of my experience. So during those high school years, where I met the School Sisters of Notre Dame, I began to seek some advice. It was a difficult thing to do because I felt like I was taking a risk to say to anyone that I felt God was calling me. That just didn't seem possible. But the sisters with whom I spoke encouraged me and called forth from me, I think, some of the undeveloped abilities. I enjoyed my high school years very much. I just had wonderful friends and good times, and continued praying and seeking God's guidance. I remember many nights falling asleep, praying the rosary, because I particularly believed that Mary, our Blessed Mother, could help me know what it would be that God wanted from me and for me. By the time I was a junior in high school, grade 11, I had come to a sense of strength of that call that God was issuing to me. And I began speaking with my parents about it. Their first reaction was I was too young, that I needed to have more experience. I couldn't possibly know what God wanted at such an early age. But God did not back away from me. And so I continued, and eventually, with my parents' support and blessing, wrote a letter to seek to be admitted to the School Sisters of Notre Dame. Well, that is now 50 years ago. And I continue to experience that sense of God calling, God loving me into life, and using me as an instrument to help others to come to a fullness of life as they deepen their love of God, their love of others, and their sharing of their gifts. If I could have imagined 50 years ago, this day today, it wouldn't have been anything like my real experience. I think I would have expected that I would be still living in a small town in Pennsylvania, still knowing a small handful of friends and family, but my life has been much more than that. I've had opportunities to study, to live in community with many wonderful sisters, to serve in many ministries where I've seen God's love in the faces of those people with whom I've ministered and as they have ministered to me as well. It's just been very rich and very full, and something I would never, ever have imagined I could experience. God's blessings are abundant, and I'm here as a witness to that. Thank you. When I was in the community as a newly professed sister, having taken vows and not yet certain that I was ready to make final profession, perpetual profession, and also the community was looking to see if I seemed to have the gifts for this life. I remember being invited to gather a group of my friends, sisters with whom I had lived, sisters who had been spiritual directors, and had played important roles in my life. And we had an evening of prayer and sharing. And it was situated in a small prayer room. It was kind of a circular room, or maybe 8 sides to the room. And we were all seated there, listening and praying and singing. And it was a profound experience for me of being affirmed in that desire that I had to give myself more fully through perpetual vows. I felt as though God gave me what I needed to be able to take that next step, because the words of others were very encouraging and supportive, and they showed me things about myself through their comments and their questions and their observations that helped me to know that I could trust God's call and God's faithfulness as I would take those next steps. God is faithful, and I have learned that over and over again. And oftentimes through the support of my friends, my colleagues, who have helped me to know that God is powerfully at work in each one of us. Through the years of my ministry, I've had lots of opportunities of a great variety. I began as a first grade teacher, and it was a delightful experience, but also something of a frightening one for me, because I felt like it was so critical that these children get a good start. And I was brand new as a teacher and not at all sure that I knew how to lead that process very effectively. But I had wonderful mentors, and I am grateful to them to this day. One sister in particular, Sister Elsa, sat with me every weekend and helped me to prepare my lesson plans and to understand how to hold the attention of these young children. After teaching first grade for about 6 years, I moved to 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and finally taught high school religion in a high school in Florida. Those other schools had been in Washington, D.C. and Maryland. Then, after leaving that high school teaching position, I had the opportunity to do pastoral ministry, religious education, in a small parish in North Carolina. Very small, very rural, and very minority Catholic population. We had a parish and a mission church there, and it was just a wonderful experience of the simple faith of the people and the desire, because I was working now with adult faith formation, the rite of Christian initiation of adults and so on. And to see that desire to deepen not just head knowledge, but heart knowledge of God, and to really grow in faith and be better prepared to support the faith of their children. I continued in parish ministry after North Carolina in several places in Maryland, and then was called to do formation ministry in our community for a number of years, and followed that with pastoral counseling and serving as a chaplain in a hospice organization. In each one of these settings, whether it was first graders or persons who were nearing the end of life, it was so obvious to me that people wanted to grow, wanted to learn, and needed simply to be encouraged in that process, and how families could support their loved ones who were critically ill the sacrifice and the selflessness that I observed on the part of many, and their desire to have their spirituality be very much a part of that journey, those final steps along the path. So I think my ministries throughout the years have been about education, for sure, as a school sister of Notre Dame, but education that helps people reach the fullness of their potential, whether it be learning to read and write and do math, learning science, learning religion, but not just learning it, living it, and then practicing it and witnessing their faith even in difficult times. I had the opportunity to support families by presiding, in a sense, at graveside services and helping people really celebrate the gift that their loved one had been and hold those memories dear as they now had reached the end of their earthly life, and to celebrate the gift of the true fullness of life as their loved one had now been received into the arms of God. And so all these years of ministry have just been wonderful examples of the bountiful love of God. If I were to imagine it, I sort of have an image of a pathway that has been laid out before me. And each of these places I have been along through the years has been like one of the stepping stones on that pathway. And all of the people with whom I've lived and ministered are all of the wonderful flowers and trees surrounding me. God has always been very powerfully present to me through the beauty of nature. So an image like that, seeing a field just overflowing with the beauty of God's creation, seeing the mountains or the stream, and knowing God is there in the works of His creation, God's creation, and that includes ourselves. So it's just always a revelation. If I open my eyes and open my heart, God is there and drawing me ever deeper into knowledge and love of God. And I wish that for everyone. When I think back on my own sense of call and response, I remember being very much afraid and uncertain, and I suspect there may be others who find themselves today in situations like that. How do you know? How do you trust? How do you proceed? Do you have any way to know that this is not just a wild imagining instead of truly God's call? What I would encourage is pray, seek opportunities to be in silence in God's presence. That may be in the church, in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. It may be in your room. It may be out in nature. It may be sitting with a trusted friend, with a spiritual director, with a sister or a priest, whether they are well known to you or not. Someone who could listen to you as you share from your heart, your desire. What is God's desire for you? What are you feeling pulled toward? What is it you want to give? What is it you believe you have to give? God is not going to ask anything without providing us the means. So if you are feeling a call, it takes a great deal of humility and honesty, I think, to be able to look at ourselves and say, yes, it is true. Yes, it is true. I can say that without being proud. I have some gifts. I have some desires. I have some energy. I have a lot of love. Could God possibly be asking and inviting me to direct that love, those gifts, that energy in His service? Is there someone with whom you can talk and test that out? I don't know that you need many colleagues or mentors of this sort. One or two, perhaps. If you are in a diocese or in a parish where they have vocation discernment opportunities, reflection days. You might be able to meet others who are also seeking and discerning, and they might become support persons for you and you for them. There might be ways you can be connected by talking with that parish priest or someone in a diocese, a sister that you can be introduced to, that you might connect with someone who could be a discernment partner with you. It would be most helpful if you could have someone and not have to try to do this discerning entirely by yourself. We need companions on the journey, and there are people who would be able to provide that kind of support. Many sisters would be happy to be a prayer partner, for sure, even if they are far away, to support by their prayer your search and your attempt to understand how it is God calls you. So I encourage you to find someone with whom you can connect to support your discernment.